Hello, welcome to Julie's Unknown podcast. I am so excited for the guests and the conversation that we're going to have to dive into today. I got Jennifer over here with me, and she is a Soulful Prosperity Coach. She leads entrepreneurs to reclaim their time and profit so that they can build a business and life that nourishes their soul. Thank you, Jen, so much for being here. And I would love to pass on the mic to you and really explain to the audience, like, what is it exactly that you do?
So my name is Jennifer Maher, and when this gets launched, I'm probably going to have a different name because I am getting divorced and I have made a huge decision to drop all names that have ever been given to me by a man, and I will be Jennifer Ann legally. So anyway, just a little story.
That's huge. That's huge.
It's huge and it feels so good. And if you don't know something, talking about, we're going to get into shadow talk. I married two Mars, two men with the last name Maher. So I'm so ready to not be a Maher. I'm very excited. But anyway, so I am a soulful prosperity coach, which is like a conscious business coach, but I do more than just the conscious business coaching. I literally come in, help entrepreneurs, business owners, artists, creatives, whatever, and help them create systems, processes, so that they can regain their time and freedom. I find that most business owners and entrepreneurs, they got into their industries because they wanted freedom, and now they're not happy, they're stressed out, they're hustling, they're chasing. And so I have a gift of really being able to just organize the business, get everybody rowing in the same direction, everybody with ownership and accountability, so that the owner or the entrepreneur or the team leader, whatever, can take back their time, their energy, and their freedom and reinvest it back into things that actually nourish their soul. So it's actual systems and processes, along with helping them grow their own spiritual journey, their own awakening to their highest and best versions of themselves.
I love that because both of those elements are so important. You can't have one without the other.
Nope.
And it's, I know that it's sometimes we just get wrapped up, we get caught up in how we think we should be running a business, or we get caught up in a mindset of like, work hard, play hard. But there's just so much more to it, and that you can have the freedom because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it is your choice. And then I think that there is some elements of shadows within there.
So many, like, because I did it that other way for 29 years in my real estate career.
Wow.
And I unearthed what I am going to hopefully be coining as the shadow why. I was driven by a shadow, a dark shadow. I was driven by the need to prove myself to everyone because I had a very tumultuous childhood. My 20s, I was on the streets, homeless, crack addicted, doing all the things that go along with that. And, when I ended up pregnant, I immediately got myself together and got my real estate license, and that was it. I was off and running to prove to the world that I wasn't this other version of me. And I think not everybody has that extreme of a story, but we're not motivated by our true purpose, by our true calling, by who we really are. And so therefore we're not in alignment. And so that's why unearthing the shadows plays a huge, huge role, because so much of that, number one, there's gifts, right? And there's light shadows and dark shadows, and there's gifts in all of it. But also, if we're not aligned with what our true purpose and our true calling is, and we don't really know the answer to who we are, then it doesn't matter how successful you are. You're still going to be chasing. There's still a void. It still doesn't, you don't have that fulfillment and that purpose that we all really want and need and deserve.
Exactly. And I love, like, when you brought up the idea where that chasing, because I know that was my life at one point as well. Like it was always like, oh, when I get this, things will be better. When I do this, it will be good. And it was always everything outside of me. And again, the proving, right? The proving to everybody else that you're not a certain person, or that you are like a certain worth. That again has everything to do with the external. It has nothing to do with within. And I think that especially when it comes to worth is huge. Like it, from like the smallest of like when you go to a job interview and someone says like, oh, like what do you think you're worth, for us to pay you? And at the end of the day, we're not, worth is not attached to anything.
Right.
And I would love to hear what your thoughts are on worth, and like, and diving into that as like a shadow, because we use that so much in our external. We try to prove, in our relationships that we're worthy to stay in there, that we're worthy of love. We try to overcompensate in work wise in our entrepreneurship. And so, what are your thoughts around that?
So, I haven't thought about it from this perspective, but worthiness is really tied to your wholeness. And that is all about the shadows, right? You cannot be in your wholeness until you have been able to look deeply and accept all aspects of yourself. And we spend so much time denying certain aspects. Literally, we are capable of every single thought that has ever happened, every action, everything. And so if you're denying that you're capable of the ones that you perceive as bad, you're also denying of the highest level of what you are truly capable of. And that stems down to boils down to your worthiness, because you really can't really embody your worthiness until you're in your wholeness. And you're always doubting it. It's like, oh, I'm worth this much, but then there's that voice, but if they knew this, or if that, or I don't have that. So you're negating it, like as you're saying it, and then you're putting all this energy into proving it, right? And so you truly don't believe in your worthiness. Even I think some of the people who speak about it the loudest are the ones that truly don't believe it. And so even if they end up, and I always like, even if they end up getting that pay or whatever, they're not getting the other sides of it, the joy, the freedom, the ease, the knowing, all of that, like being fully comfortable with who you are in all aspects. Shadow work is now becoming a very, common term. Every time I open up something, I see something written about Carl Jung, or, some of that work. So I'm really glad to see that, but people still resist it so much. I had a client call me this morning. He is so upset about everything that's going on with P. Diddy. And he had a friend call him, and the friend was like, oh, it's fake news. And he got so upset. He was like, I don't think I can ever speak to this person again. And like, I want to go to his house and like hurt him. And I'm like, okay. I was like, you have to understand, this is a shadow that goes back for generations and generations. This is a collective shadow. We as a society have allowed this kind of behavior to be maybe not acceptable for the last 200 years, but blind eye turned. That's a shot. So now with all of this coming out, everybody is recognizing moments in their own life where maybe they turned a blind eye, or maybe they didn't stand up or say something loud enough, or they allowed someone to treat them that way, or they saw somebody. So that is a collective shadow. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. And it's that one thing that has been brought to our world, and it's creating all these like triggers within each person.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and so what's interesting is that, we all have a choice, right? We could take it, we can turn a blind eye, or we could take it and say, okay, what is this showing me to learn about me?
Yes.
Am I here to grow from this, like, and learn from this? And I do think, like you said, like with shadow, like people, yes, it's becoming more and more like acceptable, more and more like out there, but people do have a fear. And I know this myself because my my business is like inner child healing and shadow work. So many times when I bring that up in conversation, like there will be times where people are like, I I don't wanna. Like I'm scared that I'll open up Pandora's box and it'll never end. And
Yeah.
what are like, I have my ways of approaching this with everybody, but what are some of your ways? Like, how would you approach that kind of topic?
So I'll just give you like how I kind of walked him through this morning to get him into a space where he could function today. I was like, try to envision under what scenarios you could have ended up like P. Diddy and taking those kind of actions. What are the scenarios where you could have ended up like that kind of person? Right? So whatever it is, like you were maybe molested as a child, or you were raised by, maybe I don't know his situation, so I don't want to say things. I don't follow the news or anything like that. But there are so many scenarios in childhood, as you know, that could turn somebody into this kind of person. And not only that, but going deep back far into their ancestry. So I try to do a lot of that, where it's like you got to start to try to understand under what scenarios that you could end up that way, right? And so you're approaching it with not judgment, but with love. And, love is not acceptance. All right. We're not accepting this behavior. No, we're not condoning this behavior, but we are nurturing the elements to which could have caused and created this, because we cannot heal, especially the collective shadow and the collective conscious. We cannot heal that with more hate, more anger, more judgment, more division, more pointing fingers. Really, we can heal the collective consciousness when we all start really understanding, nurturing, and loving. And it starts with yourself. And when I have people that are hesitant, I tell my lazy story. I love my lazy story. So I have two daughters, and we're all Libras, so we trigger each other as it is, because we're all born within a couple of days of each other. So I know that's only your sun sign, but trust me, it's powerful. And they're 2 years apart, and I was a single mom. We're very, very close. But I have been so judgy of them their whole life over laziness. Like literally, it is probably the biggest friction that we've ever had, is how judgy I get towards them, and attitudey, and just, condescending, all the things. So when I really did this deep, deep shadow work journey, Debbie Ford's light, light side of the dark, no, dark side of the light chasers. Best book. That seed was planted in me 30 years ago when I read that book. So I started it, but then really got deep into it in the last 5 years. But anyway, so the process is anything that is triggering you, behaviors that are triggering you negatively in other people, you have to write it out. I am lazy. 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 And you keep saying it, which is so counterintuitive, right? Because we're all doing these positive affirmations all the time. But here we are. I am lazy. I am lazy. I am lazy. Then all of a sudden I realize, oh my God, I am so lazy, and I am just jealous. I am so jealous that, number one, it showed me that, I was jealous, and I am inherently lazy. So I got in touch with this lazy part of myself. I gave the laziness a name, Lazy Lisa. She has a seat at the table. Lisa, Lazy Lisa, what do you need? What can I do for you? And since I have done this, my downtime, which used to be guilt-ridden, I could do 2 days of binge watching movies, eating Chinese food, drinking bottles of wine, guilt-ridden, like it wasn't enjoyable. I'm not saying it was guilt-ridden because there's something wrong with that. Whatever makes you happy. It was guilt-ridden because I didn't accept that this was a part of me that needed to be nurtured. I had this whole persona for 29 years that I had to go, do everything for everybody. And that was part of what was triggering me with them too, because I'm like, how do you get to just sit around and here I am doing everything? Yeah. It's not their fault, it's my fault. And so accepting that shadow of laziness, that dark shadow of laziness has been the biggest blessing in my life, because now my downtime is filled with, what book am I reading? What am I going to sing? What am, like, making choreographies, things with my granddaughter, creating, writing, reading, more yoga, tons of hiking. I did almost 60 days of kayaking this year. That's my lazy time now. And there's no guilt. And don't get me wrong, I still love, but I don't think I've watched more than one movie in a row in like 2.5 years. Like, I literally used to be able to watch just movie after movie after movie. It made me feel good. Well, I thought it did, right? But it was guilt still. So I try to give that story because I think that that's beautiful. It's really light. It's really easy, and it was completely transformational, and not, I really did not want to look at that because I was so afraid of being that unproductive, lazy version of myself that I was associating with not good. But I was missing out on the, look at the gifts that I denied myself for 50 something years.
Yeah, and I love that story. And sharing, I find sharing your own personal story of shadow work is where people can relate, and also people can look at it and say, oh, okay, it's not that scary. Or
No.
if there is some depth, there is some, you know, ickier things to uncover that can be a little traumatizing. This is where it is important to do it with someone that you feel safe with, and in whatever
Yes,
capacity, right? Whether it's a
absolutely.
coach, a therapist, and to have that space, somebody to hold you through. But I always tell them this. I'm like, yes, you open up Pandora's box, but eventually there's nothing there to continue. It doesn't
Yeah.
last forever.
I
It
also think it's deceiving, like, that's freedom. Opening up Pandora's box is freeing all of that stuff, right? And it's not, in that book, Light Side of the Dark Chasers, or Dark Side of the Light Chasers. Yeah, Dark Side of the Light Chasers. She has this visualization that she talks about, and it's like, we were born in a big, beautiful castle, like absolutely gorgeous castle with rooms everywhere, big, beautiful windows, just rooms upon rooms upon rooms. And what happened as a child, someone like an aunt would come over and be like, ooh, like, we don't talk like that. We don't act like that. And that room gets shut down. And then you go to school and friends are like, oh, we do this and we don't do that. That room gets shut down. Your parents, we behave, nice girls do this and nice girls don't do that. That room gets shut down. And you go throughout your life. And then by the time you're in your mid 20s, you're in like a 2-bedroom condo instead of this beautiful castle. And so it's really going back and reclaiming these beautiful rooms and getting your castle back instead of living in this constricted, confined place and space, which is really what's happening, is we're limiting our freedom. So that Pandora's box is a beautiful thing. And there's light shadows too. For me, it was grace. Anybody who I thought was graceful, I put up on a pedestal. Like, oh, I want to be like them. I want to be like that. I wish I could be like that, but I can't be like that. I'm not like that. I'm rough around the edges. I've been on the streets. This whole narrative would go along with it. And so I did the same thing with Grace. I gave Grace a seat at the table. And guess what happens? Like, I have people, when I'm done, they're like, that was so graceful. Thank you. So I'm like, did you just call me graceful? Like, boom. And I now have a permission to be softer and, just softer. And I did never had that permission my whole life. I had to be this hard, tough, this and that. So there's a lot of beautiful light shadows that are going to come in as well. You also are going to honor, like, all that toughness. It got me through so much. So it's not going away. And guess what? When I'm dealing with difficult clients and I'm dealing with this, that shadow gets front and center. Come on, let's go. We need you. So it's just a matter of becoming whole.
Yeah, and I love that, because I find that even those who are listening, like whether you are in the beginning of a healing journey or you midway through, wherever you are at, it's for me, I'm always still learning. And I remember there is this part of me, which is the hustler Julie, and she now has a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And but it took me a moment to get there because it was like a part of me in my 20s that it was like who I was. I at
Yeah.
one point had, oh my God, I don't even know, 7, 8 jobs. I was going to school. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
just go, go, go. And then as I, moved on with life, and then I started the self-development and human design, I found out I was a projector. And they're like, oh, projectors can only work 4 hours a day. And then all of a sudden I was just like, okay, well, no, I can't be that hustler, Julie. And I thought I needed to like kick it out.
Yeah.
And because it was like I had this idea at the time when I was presented with information that I was like, oh no, I cannot be like this because if I'm like this, then it's going to lead to XYZ and a story and a narrative. And then I remember having an astrology chart read, and they're like, oh, well, it's funny where, like it was Lilith, which is the dark moon is position in the house that deals with like health and debt and like those elements. And I was like, oh, like because I'm not giving hustler Julie a seat at the table and I'm
Yeah.
trying to ignore her,
Yeah.
what's happening is I was ending up in this pattern of I would get income, job, money, and then it'll end suddenly. And it was just
Right.
a pattern over and over. And it was very
Yeah.
stressful on my nervous system. And I was trying so hard to figure out where it is. And, I didn't understand it until I was like, oh, wait, but what if I give that Julie a seat at the table?
Yes.
Doesn't mean that she needs to be a hustler
Of course.
24/7 all the time. But what
No.
if she has those moments where she does hustle and where she does? And now I take it from a place of like, this Julie version comes out and it's not no, because I need the money, because that was what it was like for the longest time. But
Yeah.
now it's more, I'm creating and building a business. I am building something that I know is going to help a lot of people. And to get there, I need to do the hustler Julie needs to come out and do certain things to build this, to create the foundations so that make this happen. So it's always different depending on where you are at in your journey. And it doesn't mean to
Exactly.
like completely get rid of a part of you. It will always be there. It'll just show up at different increments in time.
Yeah. And the only thing I'll change, just this one little thing, is now you get to give Hustler Julie a seat at the table, right? It's not even that you have to. It's like this is a resource you have. This is an amazing resource. So it's like you're not even judging the dark shadows. Like I can go on and I'll end up crying because I have been in situations that like so many situations in my life that people do not live through. And so that side of me, that tough, tough, very tough side of me, I wouldn't be here without her. She's gotten me a seat at tables that I never would have gotten at without that. And so, we get to do that. We get to bring that. And then I don't know if you've ever seen Inside Out. You
Oh,
have,
I haven't. It's
okay.
on my list. It's on my
The
list.
second one does such a good job with the shadows. It's hilarious. They allow the hustle girl to, get a seat at the table and she like blows everything up. But by the end of the movie, they're all working together and they know when to bring in that part and they know when to bring in this part and they know, and it's really, really so beautifully done. And everybody should see it because it if anybody's afraid of shadow work, really understand that that movie is all about shadows. It's all about, and it's light shadows and there's dark shadows. It's not all this, gloom and doom because it's just really opening up with every negative, there is a positive. And so if you're not facing and accepting the negative, you're denying the positive, and that's where you're living in this restrictive, not freedom space. You're blocking off your intuition, you're blocking off your creativity, you're blocking off your joy. You may have moments of it. Listen, I've been meditating and had a practice for like 25 years. I haven't come to a place of actual true joy and freedom until like the last 4 or 5 years, and I have so much drama and chaos going on that's kind of coming to an end now, like with a divorce, business partner blow up, breakup, because of my unconscious choices, even though I had this deep spiritual practice, because I did not do the shadow work and I did not do that deep work. So once I really started to do that, I've always been blessed with certain things, gifts wise, with, business being really easy for me, but I never, I had high levels of success, and I just never felt happy, and I never felt free, and I never felt, I never loved myself. I also believed I was unlovable most of my life. That's why I'm getting divorced right now, because I married myself into a situation where I was going to, control, fix, and manipulate, and then he'd love me and never leave. The same with my business partner, and they both ended up like really turning on me and hurting me deeply, and which isn't even their fault. I hand it to them because I wasn't in my wholeness. I didn't know my worth.
No. And then now that you started doing the shadow work in the past 4 or 5 years, you are able to hold the space for yourself for these situations. And that is another beautiful thing about shadow work, is that you know how to hold yourself in a different lens. You know how to navigate situations differently. You see situations in a different perspective. And so even though it feels like, even though like in your external reality everything is like chaotic, falling apart, or there's just so much happening, you can hold yourself beautifully through it. And yes, are there going to be moments where you are breaking down, you're crying? Of course, you're human. But I love to ask this question to my clients, and even to myself as well, is would this version of you be able to handle it the way you are handling it now, like an older version of you? Because
Right.
we've all brought you here to be able to navigate this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that even for
Exactly.
myself, like I have situations in my life too that I'm like, oh my God, if I didn't do the shadow work, I don't know if I'll be able to hold this space, this
Yeah.
situation I'm in. And just like one example is like my current partner that I'm with. He, like, I'm the first person he's been with since his wife's passing.
Mm.
And so there are, I am holding a lot of that space in the relationship for his processing and his grieving and his growth. And I've seen so much in the last 2 years. It's been absolutely incredible. But I wouldn't have not been able to, like, maybe like not at this capacity if I have not done the work myself, and being self-aware and taking care of myself simultaneously
Exactly.
to be
Yeah.
able to hold that space for
Yeah.
him and the relationship. And if you have spoken to me like 8 years ago when I did like no inner work, none of it at all, I would be getting triggered and being like, in a place of victimizing. And it's like, oh, this is happening to me, like how
Exactly.
me and blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah,
it's
true
not.
alchemy. Everybody talks about alchemy too, and true alchemy comes from shadow work, because you are able to absorb his, negative, what negative might not be the right word, but perceived negative energies of like sadness and grief or abandonment or whatever it is, right? You're able to actually breathe that in and breathe it back out in love, and so because you understand the duality and you are not afraid of it, and you are able to hold that space and protect yourself. But really your ability is, then you become able to alchemize everything that you perceive as a negative. I mean, it's like mind-blowing. And I have always been like the most judgy person you can imagine. And all of that is gone, I don't need to like, really being able to love and accept everybody as they're showing up. I wouldn't say I'm 100% with it, but probably about 80% where I was like 0%. Like, I was just, if you didn't fit, what I thought was how you should be, I didn't respect you and I didn't treat you with respect. I was hardcore. Now I have like learned so much. Like the people that you think maybe aren't spiritual or maybe aren't this, they just have their own way of doing it. It doesn't have to be your way. And like, so what you focus on expands. So when we don't do our shadow work and we're not in our wholeness, and that's actually you're triggered, right? That's actually being triggered, right? When you're judging, you're actually triggered. And when you're triggered, it's because it's a reflection of something within you that is not dealt with. And so, yeah, like that just disappears because you're okay with it. Like you don't have to be so harsh and like, well, or it just is. Okay. And you move on and recognize the love and recognize the joy. It's freedom. It's all
Yeah,
freedom.
it really is, because I do believe that the more you look into yourself and you hold space for your shit, basically, you hold
Yeah.
space, you give them a seat at the table, then you begin to understand the world a little bit differently. You begin to understand people a little bit differently. And I think, kind of going back to the P. Diddy example, where you said like what kind of steps and paths in life could it have led for someone to be that? There is just so many, but that's it. Like life and everybody around us is like, it's not perfect. And people are born into situations and, maybe, yeah, they could have taken direction in one way, but they decided another way. And then that's what their life is and what they are here. Who knows what he is going to learn from this situation? Maybe this is going to be his inner awakening. You don't know, right? Or maybe it won't be. We don't know. We
We
don't know
don't know.
where it's going to go, but to be a little bit more compassionate about how someone got to where they did,
Yeah.
compassion can only, like, not only, no, I don't want to say that, but it is like one way that it can come from doing the work yourself and understanding yourself, because then you
Hmm.
really begin to understand that nobody's perfect and
No.
life is, is
There
chaos.
but for the grace of God. I love that
Beautiful.
expression because, and being a man now, when I was on the streets, I was a part of that world and I've seen and been like, I've had some real trauma related to those kind of scenarios and situations. But I wasn't a kid, I was in my 20s, but still, but anyway, being a man, I think it's getting better because we are finally as a society saying that's not acceptable. But I'll never forget, like I had no hope as a kid, but somehow in like when I was in my early 20s, like 22 or 23, I got straight for a little while and I got this great job doing corporate catering and I like outsold. I got like NBC as a client, like all these studios, and I was loving it. I was so good at it, and the president came into town and like made a big deal out of me and said, "Oh, I'm taking you to dinner because you've done so well." And wouldn't you know, we get in the cab and he's like, "Oh, we're going to stop at my hotel room. You're going to come up with me to put my briefcase in my room." This is how the world has been for a really long time, and it's been acceptable. But not only that, for men, it's really been a like right on, like that's been cheered and supported and loved and put up on a pedestal, that type of behavior. So, you know, if you're a man who doesn't have like the right mentorship and leadership and guidance, like I had none, I really didn't have any of that as a kid. So if I was a man in a similar situation, and your only guidance is the collective consciousness and what you're seeing in the media and what you're hearing in rap music and what you're hearing here, like, of course, how could you turn out any other way? Bitches and hoes. Come
Yeah,
on.
they're making it acceptable, right? Like at one point
Yes.
it was. And
Yes.
I remember catcalling.
Yes. Oh my
And
God, you couldn't walk in the city. Mommy, blah, blah, blah. Oh my
oh,
gosh.
gorgeous. Yeah. Oh my God. Catcalling was huge for
Dude, I loved it when I was younger. It made me feel good. I felt validated. And then for most of my youth, I didn't think I had anything going for me but looks. And so I used it as a power and I learned how to leverage that. I learned that. I didn't choose that. Like I didn't know I didn't have anything else. And I went down some really dark roads because of that, but I didn't know any different. I don't know how I ended up being able to come through it. It's a miracle. And so I can imagine for someone like PDD that, I can feel compassion. Nobody wants to wake up and be a monster. We all have the same amount of good and bad in us. And it's what's been nourished, nurtured, and what's been cultivated and and now I believe that we can become a different person in an instant. We just have to make the decision. And the shame should not come along with that. We are all capable of all things, good and bad.
exactly. Exactly. And it really is powerful to have that compassion for someone without, again, as you said earlier, without making it okay. It is not okay.
Nothing okay about it.
No, but it's that level of compassion. And that wouldn't then that comes from having that compassion for yourself and the things that you've done in the past. And this is like another element of shadow work that I love to explore is the things that you are shameful of, the things in the past that you regretted.
Mm,
And it's like, because I've had clients that they're just, they're like, oh, I have so much regret. And it's like, well, wait a second. How can you love that version of yourself? How can you express a little bit more compassion to who you were? Like, yes, what you did, it was maybe not okay, but how can you shift the perception? Maybe that version of you then didn't know any better. Maybe that
right.
version of you then was operating on survival. Maybe that version of you then was extremely hurt and
Yeah.
didn't have the emotional intelligence that it has today. There's
Yeah.
so many elements to that.
And that's why it's so powerful. If you can take like the people that you think are the worst offenders and you can go and imagine how you could end up being like that under circumstances, because sometimes it's easier for us to do that for other people. And then you realize, well, if what I've done is not nearly as horrific. And here I am able to find that compassion or understanding or you know because it's hard for us to do. We love to beat ourselves up, but that really is just an excuse. So what happens when you can't love yourself and you can't forgive yourself? You're just giving yourself permission to continue,
Yeah.
to continue when we're all here for some greater calling and some greater purpose, and we're wasting it when we can't do that.
Yeah. And what would be one of your, I guess, like for somebody who struggles to find that compassion, that forgiveness for themselves, what would be, like the one thing that they can do?
I do a lot. My daughter struggles a lot and now she has a niece. And so I have her replacing, her thoughts with what would you say to Zendaya in this situation? And how would you tell Zendaya to treat herself and how to feel about herself? And that helps her a lot. So oftentimes, being able to replace it with the people that you love and protect so much and you revere with, what if it was them and this happened to them and they behaved this way? And, you know, um, it doesn't work for everybody because some people are just so busy judging everybody as well. But most of the time, or just get into the innocence, like, picture yourself as a little girl, as a little kid, going into that place, go back and nourish them, go back and give yourself what you didn't get and what you needed. I don't know if you know anything about Rain by Tara Brach.
Is that the
Yeah.
book? I think I've,
I think she did write a book. It's a technique, it's a meditation technique, and I forget what it stands for. Recognition, acceptance, inclusion, and nourishment, I think. But it's a really great process for that. I actually just did a session of it last night, and it completely irritated the crap out of me. I had to text the teacher this morning, like, wow, you may not have seen it, but when I got through it and later, it was amazing and powerful. So thank you. But that's what I had to say to her, because I was like through it. But it's a really, so listen, I still can do that. I did it last night. I was not able to get into that space, of loving and forgiving myself and nourishing myself and, all of these things. I just need a little more time, and I was able to come through it. So I would just say, don't give up. Find different techniques, find different, practices. I've been on this journey for what, like 25 years, like a hardcore journey of self-development. And I'm really just feeling I mean, not that I've had a beautiful life. I don't want to, but a lot of ups and downs, a lot of big blow ups and whatnot, because I was not fully conscious, not understanding my worth, not, giving myself a break and accepting myself and loving myself for who I am in its totality.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to add to it is that going back to that younger version of you, like the way sometimes I like to approach it is that, like if you have kids or, like have kids or your future kids is, would you speak to them in that way?
Right.
How you are speaking to yourself and or to that younger version of you. So like how would you speak to them instead? How would you explain to them instead? Because when things happen at a certain age, what happens is that in that moment our brain processes it a certain way and creates a story, a narrative, and then from there, that is where that story continues to build and build. And then we find all this evidence from the outside world, and it's like making this story true. And then one day happens, we get triggered, or we're stuck in a pattern that we can't seem to break or get out of. And it's going back to like, what was that story? What was that moment in the past that we created for ourselves? And how can
Yeah.
we shift that with the shadow work? How can we shift that and share the compassion and look at it from a different lens?
Yeah. I also think the resistance, when people are resisting it and they can't find that compassion for themselves, I think a lot of things have an underlying fear and laziness. Okay. It sounds crazy, but it's not. We're almost afraid to heal and become this best version of ourselves and untap our potential and all of that, because we have this vision of like it's so much work. But really, keeping Pandora's box closed and locked is where all the work is. That takes so much energy, and it's draining and exhausting. It is not fun. It is not creative. So all I can tell you is that if you embark on this journey, yeah, there's work, but it's beautiful. It's joyful. It's creative. It is fun. It is childlike. I'll give you a little experience that happened to me about 3 weeks ago. I was invited last minute to as a coach to a client's wedding in Block Island, and I've never been to Block Island. I have no way of knowing what it looks like, and it looked nothing like I thought. I thought it was going to look like Montauk, and it's very different. And so I've now realized that, because I haven't suffered from anxiety in a really long time, and like with what's going on in my life right now, I've realized the anxiety that I experience is not anxiety, it's intuition. And if I ignore it, then it feels like anxiety, but it's not, it's intuition. And so I have this very intense intuition going on with this situation. So I get there Saturday morning, nobody, I don't have a car. I'm stuck in the middle of Block Island. The whole wedding party is all over the place. I was like, I'm going for a walk. Got to take care of myself. I need to, nourish myself so I can be present for this situation that I'm here to facilitate and help. And so I go for the walk, and I go for this like 15-minute walk, and then I see this like hiking trail, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go down the hiking trail. And I'm about 10 minutes into the hiking trail. I'm looking around, and I realize I do this visualization with my clients called the garden, where I take them to this garden and they design this garden. And in this garden, they meet the highest and best version of themselves, and they have to imprint it. And then they go to this garden whenever, they feel it. I was in my garden. It was like every single detail, every
Mhm.
single detail
My God.
was my garden. Like everything about it was my garden. And so I obviously realized, how fully supported, loved, connected, communicated with, doesn't matter what this intuition is telling me, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. And I get back, and within an hour, my intuition was 100% right. I get the call. This is what's going on. And it was fine. I was fine. And it was like, okay. And like, what? And I truly believe that type of experience is through that shadow work, really being open to that potential and that possibility that I really am a beautiful, divine being. I mean, that was my garden. It was like, what? And so you could choose to say, oh, it's just a coincidence, or it's just and that. I don't know, but that was 3 weeks ago, and this situation still is not gotten better and is probably going to get worse before it gets better. And I'm in like the best place I've ever been.
Exactly. I love that story. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Like I did get goosebumps.
Yeah. Oh,
And and I do believe that also anxiety. I know there's a lot of different beliefs about it out there, but I do believe it is intuition at the end of the day.
mm,
At the end of the
mhm.
day, whether it's intuition about something externally to happen or something internally to look
Yeah.
at. And that's what
Yeah.
I believe it is. And for me, use like I say anxiety, okay, like what are you here to show me?
Yeah.
Come sit at the
Yep.
table. What
Yep.
am I here that I need
Exactly. Don't ignore it. Don't bury your head in the sand. Don't binge watch 25 movies instead. Figure it out. And then if you want to go do that, do it. Like I'm not,
exactly.
it's not about judgment, it's not. But not ignoring it, really, really paying attention. And, the fact that I was able to not, the people, like the reformed people pleaser, which is crazy. Here I am, this like real tough girl who's a total freaking people pleaser. They kind of end up going together, believe it or not. But the people pleaser in me would have sat around, waited when I hear from this, blah, blah, blah. No, I was like, I'm going to take care of myself. And I did. And I got the most beautiful gift, that one of the most amazing experiences in my entire life. And it came out of just taking care of myself.
And I always say, how can you hold space for the people around you? How can you be there for other situations where when your cup is empty?
Yes, one of my coaches, David Meltzer, I love him dearly. He was like, you're such a giver. You need to receive more than you give. And I'm like, what? He's like, no, you cannot. You need to receive. I'm going to say it again, Jen. You need to receive more than you give. You need to be open to receive. You need to be accepting. Even little things like on my, Facebook on my birthday, I got like 430 replies, and I just wrote like my whole life, my whole experience, I was always replying back individually. I was like, I'm just receiving it. I don't need to give anything back. I don't need to say thank you. I don't need to do, like, I just received it. And it sounds so silly and so small, but receiving doesn't mean like I'm this self-centered, and it just means, yeah, thank you. I deserve that. This is beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Like even down to like people saying, oh, you look beautiful today, instead of going, oh, really? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right? That's receiving. And so receiving doesn't have to be this, we think of it as this gimme, gimme, gimme. No, it's not. It's just really being open to all of it. And it's not easy as when you're a giver. And it's been an amazing, I put myself first now. I put joy first. Like my hustle schedule, I still have some hustle in there. The joy comes first. You can't kayak 60 something days unless you put that joy first, right? Because you know what happens. Then the next thing you know, there's no time for it. So since I've been doing that, the freedom is just incredible.
Love that. I love that. And oh my God, I love this conversation. It
Mm.
has been absolute
It
joy.
could go on and on.
We could go on and on. I was just like, I love being very mindful of the time frame that we
Yes,
have and of
absolutely.
your time as well. It has been a pleasure. And so I would like for you to share, how can people follow you? What do you have going on? Let the audience know.
So on Instagram at Jenn Maher Coach, JENNMAHER Coach. I shouldn't even say that because I don't know what's going to be that handle soon. So JenniferMaher.com, no matter what, will always get you to where you need to be. JENNIFERMAHER.com, even if I have a new website, because I'm doing all this resetting of everything. So I'm super excited, but that will always go where you need to be. One of the things that I'm launching that I'm super excited about, and I'm 100% set on the title. It's called Untethered Mastery Habit Breaking Coaching. So I'm actually going to be doing habit breaking coaching for, kind of high performing people. So I'm not like looking to be like a sobriety coach. People that have reached certain levels and want to break through, and they were like me and they were still using alcohol as a crutch, still binge watching, or addicted to sugar, or addicted to sex, whatever that is holding you back. That's going to be my new coaching offer. So I'm excited about that. So hopefully that will be launched by the time this comes out. And if there's anything I can do to help anybody along their path, just reach out.
I love that. And I'm going to have all that information in the show notes. So, yay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is all for today, everybody. I will speak to you next time.